Hello and welcome back to Clinical Psychology Community UK. My name is Holly and I'm a second year trainee clinical psychologist in the UK. Today we are going to be talking about how to get an assistant psychologist job. Yeah, they are competitive, but here we are. We're going to talk about it today. So let's get into it. Hello. Just before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about the socials. You can find us on YouTube. Obviously, you have done that. You can find us on Instagram and on Facebook as well. Make sure that you give us a follow. And engaging by subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing, it really, really helps with the algorithms and getting this video out to as many people that can see it as possible. I understand you might not want that as an assistant psychologist. You don't want anyone else to see it and get the tips, but please do share it. It's really helpful. So I want to go through some basic information about assistant psychologist jobs first, and a couple of caveats as well before I get into the advice. So assistant psychologist jobs, I'm going to be calling them AP jobs just because it's easier to get your mouth around, can be very varied. They are usually band 4 or band 5 in some places on the NHS pay scale. Band 4 usually is considered an entry level, although most AP roles are band 4. So you might have had 3 AP roles before and you're still at band 4 because that's what they tend to be advertised as. There are band 5 jobs around. They, in my experience, seem to be more likely in Scotland or Wales. That's where I have mine. And sometimes they're known as senior assistant psychologist. But they can be around. And banding is decided by the services and the trusts that kind of commission the posts, and it can be different everywhere. So yeah, there's no kind of rhyme or reason to it. It's not like you're going to be band 5 if you're in Wales and band 4 if you're in England, or band 5 if you're in London and band 4 if you're not. It's very varied, so keep a lookout. So the duties of an AP then. They have clinical duties usually, depending on the role. They can do assessments, individual interventions like guided self-help, or even some kind of low-intensity type therapy stuff, or therapy even, group interventions and resource development, those sorts of clinical things that they can do, lots of screening and that sort of thing. Also research and development, things like audits, literature reviews, data input, admin, analysis sometimes. They can all be done by assistants as well. Staff support, so this has been a big one, particularly since COVID, I would say, for reflective sessions and staff training to be around, and psychology does tend to be involved in that depending on the service that you're in. So you can usually find the jobs on the NHS website. I'd recommend that. They are also on LinkedIn and Indeed and things like that, but if ideally you'd be going NHS, because if you're going for an assistant job, you're most likely going to be trying to get onto the doctorate to do clinical training. You may not. You may go into another field of psychology. You might do a completely different psychological profession. You might go into therapy. There's lots of other things that you can do with an assistant job experience, but you're likely to be going for the DClin. And if you are, they tend to value NHS experience. So I would always try and recommend getting in the NHS first. Sometimes that isn't the case, and you might be able to get a non-NHS before you get into the NHS. So that's also something to consider, but you can find them on lots of job websites. And lots of jobs that are available all year round, but many jobs do come up between July and September when APs start to leave to get onto training. And then there's a big job shuffle where people who didn't get onto training or didn't apply kind of go for a different AP job, and there's lots of movement around then. And there might also be movement around sort of February, March, April time, because that is the end of the financial year, is in March to April. So there might be like new funding coming through for the year. So yeah, those are some times to watch out, but there are lots around throughout the year. Let's talk about the job requirements then. So you can find out what you need for each role in the person specification. All right, this is probably not a surprise to anyone, but it's either a separate document that you can find on the job advert, or it's at the end of the job description, it might be, which is also usually a separate document. And it kind of has a table that shows all the different domains of things that they want in the successful candidate. So generally you will need some education. You will need either an undergraduate degree in psychology or a master's conversion in psychology. They need to be BPS accredited usually, because that gives you the graduate basis for chartership. So that kind of is that first initial chunk that you need to be able to be a qualified psychologist. If you're interested in the kind of route towards becoming a professional psychologist in the UK, I have done a video on that, and I'll link that down in the description as well. So that's the first thing that you'll need. You'll need some sort of qualification. You will also need some experience. It's highly unlikely you're going to get an AP role without any experience, like straight out of uni. That is quite unlikely. You can go for it if you want, but it's still quite unlikely, I would say. So lots of the experience that they want you to have is an AP role previously, some AP experience. They also want you to have some work with the client group, work in a similar service, work with psychologists before as well is usually really helpful. And also a role where you've developed those transferable skills like risk assessment, auditing, research, building a therapeutic relationship, those sorts of things that they're really interested in. So generally, those are the two big things. There are other things that they ask for in the person spec, but they are generally the two big things. Yeah, other experiences can include SPSS, knowledge of research design, published papers. For example, it really depends on the role. So if it's a more research-focused AP job or research and development kind of focused one, they might want you to have a bit of experience of doing data analysis or data collection a little bit more autonomously. But if it's like an assistant job where you'd be doing some kind of clinical work, then they might want you to have clinical experience. So it really depends on what job you're applying for. So just to give you a bit of background, my AP experience. So I worked as an AP for 18 months before I started the DCLIN. It was just in one AP role that I had after applying for a lot of times. I worked in a primary care mental health service at Band 5, and the role was kind of split between the general primary care mental health service, developing interventions, delivering interventions, doing auditing, literature reviews. It was kind of more service development-y. And then also half of the time I was spent improving access and provision for older adults, because we realised in that service that actually older adults weren't accessing the service in anywhere near a representative amount compared to the location that we were in. So yeah, there was developing groups, delivering interventions. I co-facilitated a therapy group a couple of times, did some literature reviewing. I audited some stuff, feedback and wrote some reports, did a large audit of some stuff. So there was quite a lot that I did, and also this coincided with COVID. But before that, this is kind of the journey to getting to that. I graduated from my undergrad degree in 2015, and then I went on to do a master's straight away. So I finished that in 2016, and then I went on to be a support worker in a weight management service in the NHS for a year. And then I was a recovery worker in substance misuse for about 8 months. And then I went on to be a senior recovery worker in substance misuse for 18 months, and then I got my assistant psychologist job, and I was there for 18 months, and started the DCLIN in September of 2021. So that's kind of my experience with this. So yeah, I haven't had that many AP roles, and there are some people that have had loads and loads and loads, and there are some people that have had one or none even while getting onto the DCLIN. It's completely possible to get on without that experience. It depends what experience you have in its place. You know, just because your job description or your job title doesn't say assistant psychologist doesn't mean that you're not doing things that are relevant. You know, you could be doing all of the things that an assistant does. You just might not be titled that. So it's really important that you value the experience that you've got, but we'll get into that. I do want to start with some caveats. Obviously, AP jobs are notoriously competitive, okay? Sometimes there can be 100 to 150 plus applicants for one position. Okay, it's the most competitive part of becoming a psychologist, I think. If you just look at the numbers, you know, the doctorate isn't actually as competitive as that. So yeah, it really is something to consider. There can be 100 to 150 plus. Sometimes there might be like 50. So it really depends, and it is very much a numbers game. The tips that I'm going to go through are things that I found helpful and I wish that I knew when I was going through the AP journey. But if you ask every AP and every trainee that's been an AP, they will probably all have different things that have helped them. So yeah, this is just one perspective. And this is targeted around getting paid assistant experience. Honorary jobs are controversial. I generally don't advise that people go for them because I don't agree with them. I don't think it's fair that we ask graduates, that have gone into 30, 50Ks worth of debt to work for free, doing complicated things that you need training for. I don't agree with it. Obviously, if you can go for that, then do, because people, everyone's experience is different, everyone's situation is different, and if you can go for that, and that's something you want to do, then of course you need to do what you want to do, and it can help you get experience. But this video is really about paid experience, and that's what I'm trying to help with. And also, this is not the only route to the doctorate. Okay, this is not the only route to the declan. There are lots of other routes. You can be a psychological wellbeing practitioner. You could be a therapist. You can be a research assistant. You could be lots and lots, a support worker, a recovery worker. You can be so many different things. You don't have to be an assistant. The thing about assistant jobs that makes them so good for pre-training is that you're working with psychologists under the supervision of a psychologist. So if you can get that in a different job, you really will be doing very similar things to what assistants will be doing. So working with psychologists really is a key part of this. Okay, tip number 1 is getting experience, obviously. The best experience, as I've said, is working with psychologists or in a team where there are psychologists. You can find out whether this is the case by calling the job advert. So if it's an AP job, you will be working with psychologists. That is part of it. You have to be. The BPS has got guidance, which they are currently reviewing around the employment of assistant psychologists. I'll link that down in the description as well. Yes, it's very important that you have a look at those guidelines because they're not always followed. But if you're an assistant, you will be working with a psychologist. If you're looking at jobs like support worker roles or recovery worker roles, something that isn't an assistant psychologist job, then call the person that's listed on the advert and find out a bit about the team, or Google a bit about the team. And what you want to do when you're trying to get that experience before getting an AP job, or while you're getting one, but primarily before, is to focus on those transferable skills. Okay, those skills that you need to be a psychologist at any level, assistant, trainee, qualified. These are the skills that you need to varying degrees. You need risk assessment and management, and I've got a video coming about that. Incident reporting, clinical assessment, working with other disciplines, huge one, and basically wherever you work in the NHS, you will be doing that probably. Formulation, running groups, building therapeutic relationships. And I would look out for support worker, recovery worker, bank assistant psychologist, which is a bit more casual and flexible, and healthcare assistants. Things like that can be really useful. And I think it can sometimes feel like a massive rush. When you finish your psychology undergrad or master's, there's a lot of narrative around, you'll never do it, you'll never get onto clinical, don't do it. And that's what I was told, as I've said before. Well, on the first day of my degree, they've told us not to go for clinical because it's too competitive. But I think there absolutely are ways that you can get there. I just don't think you need to rush it. I really, really would advise not rushing it, because I felt so rushed for the 5 years that I was applying for assistant jobs, and it actually just was bad for my mental health. And the experience I was gaining during that time was so useful when I became an AP, and also when I became a trainee, and it will hopefully continue to help me when I qualify. So whatever experience you can get is going to be valuable. And I think actually, if all we did was train psychologists from undergrad to masters, or to AP job, then training, actually that'd be really boring, and psychologists wouldn't have that many skills, because we need experience of working in different areas and different services and different systems to be able to get that experience that we can really make a difference. I think it just makes us a bit more rounded. So please focus on trying to get that experience, and getting experience that means something to you, which takes me to tip number 2, finding the right job for you. NHS jobs, ideally, as I've said, are probably the best way to go about it, although they are likely to be more competitive. NHS experience is valued in most AP jobs, and definitely for the declan. And there's also something around kind of length of service as well. So, in terms of pay increments and whatever else, it's helpful to have a length of service that's important. I personally don't. I was out of the NHS for 2.5 years when I was in substance misuse. So I've got breaks in service. It doesn't make that much difference, but it's kind of helpful to know about. Most jobs will only be up for one day. Most AP jobs are super, super quick. Like sometimes they might only be up for a few hours. It's ridiculous because they can set them to close when they get, 100 applicants or whatever it is that they want to shortlist. So you do need to be quite on it, I would guess. I say guess, definitely that's what I did. I generally would be looking at NHS jobs once a day. Even if I was happy in my job, I would always be looking and applying because that's what I wanted. So I'm not saying you have to do that and be obsessive about it, but, I'd make sure that you are keeping an eye on what it is and, setting up a job alert is helpful. I would also say to have an application form template that will help with this. NHS jobs and lots of other job websites are quite helpful with this because it will save the one that you've had before. But you might need to make some tweaks to it, which we'll come on to. Even though jobs are only up for, a day or so, I would read the job description and person spec carefully. It's likely that it's going to be fairly similar. Lots of them are like really formulaic and templated. But it's important that you read it because, if you, for example, have experience of having an eating disorder and you may not actually want to work in eating disorders, just applying to any assistant job in your location and not realising actually that's going to be quite difficult personally for me. I know that sounds really obvious, but it just make sure that you actually read what you're applying for because it really does make a difference. And you'd be surprised how many applications I read which someone has written that's clearly for a different job, because that's an easy way to just get rid of you out of that shortlisting. So don't give them that excuse. I would also try and research the service if you can. And this might be maybe more relevant when you get to interview stage, but I do think it's important to research the service just a little bit. So you can, when you are tweaking your application, you can kind of think about how that service might read it, if that makes sense. So definitely do some research of the service. And also take some time to reflect, like what experience do you need? Fine, you need assistant psychologist experience to get assistant psychologist experience, or you need a clinical experience to get onto the doctorate. What do you need? And actually, what do you want? What sort of work do you want to do? I think that is ultimately the most important thing, because I would apply for like every assistant psychologist job that was in a location that I was able to get to or happy to move to, because that's what I was so focused on it, actually quite unhealthily, I would think now, looking back. But I would apply for things that I clearly didn't want to do. There were lots of jobs that I applied for and I didn't get shortlisted because my passion wasn't there for it. So it's okay to be selective. Even if this is very competitive, it's okay to be selective and do the things that you want to do. Spend some time thinking about what matters to you, what your values are. Do you want to work with psychosis, for example? And if you do, then try and work in a service that does psychosis work. And if you can't get that, then try and work somewhere where psychosis might present, like secondary mental health teams, community mental health teams, or substance misuse. There are clever ways around it if you just spend some time thinking about what it is that you want. And if your only answer is, I want an assistant psychologist job, then, which mine was for many years, I would really encourage you to think a bit more deeply about why you want that. Is that for the declin? Okay, well, why do you want the declin? Really ask yourself these questions, because I do think it will make a difference in what job you end up getting, because you're going to be in that job for at least a year, probably. So it's important that if you're going to spend a year of your life doing something, that's, if you're in a massive rush to get onto the declin, a year is a chunk of time. So really think about what you want to do, what area you want to work in and what you need. And yeah, set up a job alert massively helps, I think, just because then, if you're able to have it on your emails and you can just quickly click, and then it's done. Number 3 is writing a good application form. Now, I have a video on this, so I will link that down below. And it goes into a lot more depth. It's like a chunky video going through examples of what to write and how to write it and how to match everything up. So if this is just a very quick breeze through of that. So yeah, as I say, I've done a video on this. Some key support, but your application will basically stay the same, in terms of what your experience is, the jobs that you've had before and everything. But your supporting information is the thing that changes. So that's like that kind of chunky free text box that you've got to just write in your supporting information. And in my experience of shortlisting, I haven't shortlisted for assistant jobs, but I have shortlisted for support worker and recovery worker jobs. I just went straight to the supporting information. In fact, that's what I was told to do by my service manager. So I would really, really encourage you to take some time to think about what you want to write. So the key for this match the headings with the headings in the person spec. So go to the person spec, the table that has qualifications, experience, knowledge and skills, all of that, and have those as headings. So you have qualifications as a big bold heading, and then you have whatever it says. So it will say eligibility for chartership or psychology degree, minimum 2-1. Then you can just write with a bullet point. I think that's the next thing. There we go. Have each item in the person spec as a subheading and use bullet points. So then you can say psychology degree, what, classification you got, masters, whatever it was, and any other qualifications. Done. Okay. Then you can move on to experience, and it will say, it will say something like experience of working with mental health problems. Right, so then you can say one bullet point underneath, you can say one job where you worked with people, and you can write a little bit about that and some examples of times that you worked with people. Then the next bullet point will be a different job. And then you can go through like that and make it really, really easy for them to get that information. And this is the biggest one when I give feedback on application forms. And this is something it took me ages to get my head around personally. Show how you meet the criteria. Don't tell them. So, for example, I think I've got an example, yeah. So an example, firstly, is the ability to work effectively with conflict. So the bullet point there could be, I can work well in high conflict environments and situations. Well, that's telling them. That's not actually showing them anything. That's just saying, yeah, I can do that. And if your whole supporting information is, yes, I can do that, yes, I can do that, yes, I can do that, that's great. But they need some evidence. They need something to understand how you meet it. And something to, inform their opinion of you. Because actually, if you just say, yeah, I can do it, they don't learn anything. So another way of doing it, and I wouldn't copy this word for word, use your own words. And this also could be longer and better. But in terms of ability to work effectively with conflict, you could write, managing high conflict situations was a key learning experience in substance misuse. Clients would often display aggression, and we followed conflict training through using a calm voice and giving clear instructions to those around. Instant reporting through Datix and staff debrief procedures were followed. So you could give a more specific example, but that shows, yes, I can work with conflict, which is the first bit of that. They're getting that implied within this. Yes, I can do it because this is how I've done it. So that is definitely what I'd recommend doing, is trying to think of examples of how you've done these things. And I know that adds time to doing your supporting information. I get it. It does take extra time, but it makes such a difference. I really do think it does. And actually a lot of the AP jobs are quite formulaic, so you are able to do this. It might be that some of them are a bit different and you need to change it. I'd have a Word document with all of them on there, a big master one that you can copy and paste them in, and not be writing it every time. So yeah, that's the overall tips to writing a good application form. But if you want to know more, I really would try that video. And remember, imagine you had to read 100 applications, right? Make it easy for them. This was a bit of feedback I got from somebody when I was really early on in trying to get an AP job. They said, make it easy for me to shortlist you, not easy for me to reject you. So if you're writing, lots of people actually might like prose, might like just paragraphs of stuff. I personally prefer the bullet points. It's easier to get all the information for me. But do what feels right for you as well, I would say. But yeah, try and make it easy for them. And there you go. Have a basic template you can update for each job. Okay. This seems like an obvious one. But nailing the interview is tip 4. So AP interviews can be, again, a bit formulaic. So you might get the odd curveball, but usually you can expect something like this. Why do you want this job? Or to work in this service? Or to work with this client group? What are some of the challenges or issues or risks this client group face? And something around knowledge questions. For example, tell me about your knowledge of treatment for the presentation of client group, or knowledge of national guidelines, etc. And then you'll get some scenario or process questions like, what would you do if you and your supervisor disagreed? What would you do if a client disclosed something concerning to you? Those sorts of things. And then you'll also have experience questions. Tell me about a time where you managed a risk effectively, or worked part of a team well, or had a difficulty with a colleague, and what did you learn from it? So that'll be those sorts of questions as well. I'd also recommend asking thoughtful questions at the end. So not just when would we expect to hear, but asking what does an average day look like for an AP in the service, or what are the service's biggest strengths and achievements over the last year, or what does the service want to achieve in the next year that I can get involved with. It really shows that you're thinking about it. The other thing I would say is try and link everything back to this job that you're interviewing for. So if they say to you, tell me about a time where you managed a risk effectively, tell them about that time, and then say, so this is why it's going to make me a really good AP in this service, because I'm able to risk assess this client group in the same way, and bring the skills over. Just that little sentence, linking it back, I think it does make a difference, because it really shows that you're focused on this job and not just applying and interviewing for any AP job. Again, I've done a big video on this, on NHS interviews generally, the Assistant Psychologist one, so I'll link that down below as well. But remember to smile and relax and take the, I have to get this Assistant Psychologist job to ever become a psychologist out of your head. Take that out of your head. It's not useful. Okay. And my final tip is navigating the rejection, because it is a part of Assistant Psychologist, the journey. It just is. If you're not successful, that's the norm, not the exception. That is, if you take nothing else away from that video, just this, okay? If you're not successful, it's the norm, not the exception. It's understandable that if you feel rubbish, especially if you've been trying for a long time, as I say, I tried for 5 years to get an assistant job, and it really was soul destroying. But always ask for feedback and chase it until you get it. So you might chase 5 times and never get it, and in that case, yeah, fine, you might not be able to get it, but mostly people are good with feeding back. So always ask for feedback, whether it's written or verbal. Just ask for something back. You could also ask the interviewers advice about what you could do to progress, or what sort of role you should be aiming for, or what would have been, what would have helped. And I would also advise keeping a log of the feedback that you've received from the interviews, as it will help you in the next one. No feedback is useless. The most annoying feedback, I think, is, oh, you were brilliant, no faults. Just the person that we employed had more experience, or direct experience, or they were internal, or something like that, because actually then there's not a lot you can do. But it's still not useless feedback. What it is helpful for, okay, I'm actually ready for an AP job. I just now need to play the numbers game, and I need to keep interviewing until I get one, basically, because you're ready. So no feedback is useless. And I would also remember that the numbers are against you. I'm sorry, but they are. I'd be remiss if I lied and said that you're definitely going to be able to get it first time. The numbers are against you, and it is a numbers game. So don't be too hard on yourself. It's not the exception to not get to the job. It's the norm. All right. So, in summary, AP jobs are competitive, and gaining relevant experience is super useful. Most experiences can be turned into relevant experience with the right reflection. And this isn't spin as such, but it is actually just thinking about reflecting properly, because you will learn something from everywhere you work in whatever way, whether it's working with other people, whether it's, if you were there somewhere for 3 months and you had an awful manager and you wanted to leave, then that you are still learning things about yourself and about how you manage those situations. So no experience is useless. I would focus on developing transferable skills, those things that we've kind of talked about before, because they are going to be the things that are really helpful for, if you go for an AP job, they want someone that is experienced for a reason, and getting some of those experiences and those skills will possibly negate the fact that you don't have AP experience. Actually, if you've got lots of other skills that an AP would have, then it helps. It strengthens your case. And I would also spend time developing an application form template, definitely, and show rather than tell on the supporting information. That's true of anything that you do. Try and give examples. Rejection is inevitable, but it's more a reflection of the numbers, not you. So keep going. Just want to say thank you so much for supporting us. I really appreciate all your comments and all your engagement, particularly on the Instagram. So I really appreciate it. We will see you next time for another video. Take care. Bye bye.